2023 Hartford Board of School Directors meeting to order. Changes, additions, and approval of the agenda.
Understand that we need a executive session. We move that we add that to the agenda.
You want to take the first read of the gender equity policy off, or table it, or discuss it?
Let's just discuss it very quickly.
Okay, update.
Yeah, update.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we can put update. Right.
Any other proposed changes?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, hearing none, I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Recognition of outstanding student achievement. Tom, are you gonna do that one for us?
We are actually going to skip that or table that till the next time, so that should have been changed, I guess.
Okay.
But without Nancy here,
Yeah, right,
I wasn't
right.
prepared to do that.
I guess I'd just like to make a quick statement about that. We got correspondence from the Chief Justice of the Vermont Supreme Court, and he was elated by his visit to Hartford. And this is something they've been doing. So to hear those great words are pretty cool. So I'm going to talk to Nancy about recognizing the two administrators and their teams and their students for the reception, because it made that much of an impression. So just wanted to add that to the recognition piece. And so that means Tom and Nelson and his team and Erica and her team, just rock stars. Okay. Communication and support to the board.
Well, last week we had parent-teacher conferences, and that went really well. So at all levels, K through 12. And this week we have Friday is Veterans Day, so it's kind of a little crazy couple of weeks, but very busy in the district, especially in our office, right, Jake? Jake has been leading the accounting team through the training for the new Infinite Vision software. So people are pretty excited about it, but it is a tremendous amount of work. So thank you, Jake, for doing that. In the schools, people are just really busy with, getting ready for testing and completing testing, and just fall weather coming in. Tomorrow's supposed to have some snow or sleet in the morning, so people are pretty wound up about whether we're going to have a delay or a cancellation. I'm crossing my fingers. No.
White River School called while I was in the car. I'm like, no, not yet. But it was something completely unrelated. But that was my first thought.
Yeah.
I know what the answer is going to be. If there's any snow at all, it's 2 hour delay. That's your favorite call.
Right. So kids are super busy with drama productions and athletic events and homecoming and fireworks shows and lots of good stuff. But it's starting to button up for the winter. It's always kind of sad because kids don't come out as much and outside. That's pretty much it right now.
So that brings us, right into the work of the evening. So we'll start with an update from the finance department.
As Tom said, we've been out straight with the implementation software, and I vastly underestimated just how much work this was going to be, because we figured I figured that, going from one Tyler product to another would be pretty much, okay, they did the data poll, little couple things to implement, and then flipping a switch. And as I've learned, it's like putting in a whole new software because
Yeah.
it is less data to move over, but the setup has been very intense. So today we actually just started phase 3 of the project, which is more of like the fine tuning and testing and getting everything ironed out. So there's a couple more things to set up. We have the onboarding module, but the main ones like the general ledger, the accounts payable, and the payroll. Payroll has been huge to set up, but I think it's going to streamline a whole lot of processes and make things simpler. One of the things that we're really excited about is the employee access. So people will actually be able to go online and reprint their pay stubs, their W-2s, and they'll have access to their contracts and everything. So it's not oh geez, I lost it. Okay, I can log in and go pull it myself. So it's been pretty great.
Cool.
Tonight I just gave you kind of the 40,000 foot view of the budget increases so far, which is really like the administrator increases, the teacher increase as far as the track and staff, the support staff increase, and then the Blue Cross Blue Shield. That was a bit of a hit at 16% when we announced that for draft rates. Obviously, that still has to go through different board to get approved and everything, but that was quite a surprise to everyone and all my fellow business managers. And then as far as some of the other budgets.
That's what happens when the insurance company gets bought out by another insurance company.
Yeah.
They need to pay back their loan.
One of the things that we had said was a contributing factor there was people are using insurance a lot more than they had been previously. But also, they've been a lot more claims, so they're like, we've kind of used some of our stock money, but now we're starting to get into, not such a good financial place. So that's why they gotta bump those up a little bit. But I mean, as far as the building expenses, like the kind of the repairs, I just put in $117,000 back in to bump us up to the $400,000 district where we are, and that gets us to $750,000 district wide for repairs. Obviously, there's going to be a whole lot more conversation as far as what that number can be and should be. But I mean, I think a lot of that's going to depend on our tax situation and kind of the numbers as they start to come in. And then, of course, we have the Butler Bus contract increase of $16,369. So overall, right now, first draft is always kind of the high stuff, and then draft 2, we start to get into more of the wish list items that you say yay or nay on. So overall, 1.9 so far.
So just as we continue the discussion with the community, just so it's helpful, and we don't have to do a big narrative component to this, but just so people understand, with our existing contract costs and those increases, like what equates to the increase in food service? Is it our population increase, blah, 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 those types of things. Same thing with transportation, does it, with the expansion of the routes, and as we saw from the enrollment study and population study, our catchment area is growing, and is it where we want to see it, as far as the total number of need? Maybe not, but even regardless, it's happening. And that affects almost all of these numbers as we continue. And we just need to keep people aware of that nexus you were talking about.
That we have a year of accumulated inflation, which really hasn't showed up because we've been living on the prices we negotiated the year before. And now all of a sudden the stuff, so buses are more expensive because the people who make them the new contracts fuel's more expensive, et cetera, you just go
Labor.
down the line. Healthcare we know is more expensive when you make anything, one of your major costs is the people, therefore the healthcare that they have is more expensive. So it all rolls through.
But it's helpful, I think, because we've all had conversations with our neighbors or, fellow, Hartford, folks, and they just like to know, what is it? So I think, our responsibility is to ensure that there's transparency in that, and it isn't just because of open meeting or anything else. I think, that's our job, make sure that that happens, that people understand why things are going the way they are.
And as far as contracts goes, like there's specific legislation about how much you can go up, and it's,
Right.
I want to say it's like 3% or the CPI in the case of food service. So either you're making enough money and you're meeting, at or below the CPI or that 3%, or you're going back out to bid. And neither party really enjoys that one. So we try and make it work together because it's a partnership with any of our contractors.
If this is an appropriate place to ask, I've lost track of it, but I thought we were trying to set up a meeting to go over the auditor's report. Is that still in progress or?
It is.
Okay.
We've been trying to get some fine tuning for the audit as far as getting like a real good kind of a 2.0 draft.
Okay.
Because there were some of the numbers that we were applying tax money that we want to get as much of a close thing for the draft before we finalize it that we can. So
Good.
I'll circle back.
That was something I had done.
Yeah, no, I'll circle back to Sam because there were some of the grant pieces that we were trying to tie out to, and it's just the ESSER money is a double-edged sword. I mean, it's been very helpful, but
Paperwork is enormous.
as far as like the actual auditing, it's been like,
Yeah.
here's my binder and everything under the sun.
Yes, the stack of money is this high. The stack of paperwork is this high.
Yes. So,
I was never
Federal money.
introduced to an 8-inch binder until I saw the ones that came out of your office.
Yeah.
8-inch, it's like,
Does it have hinges in the middle? Thought my stage management 4-inch ones were huge.
Right,
It comes
right.
with its own stand-up.
Right.
Jeez, those used to be the norm, right? The 5-inch binders, and millions of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
But-
All right.
Yes, no, sure.
This 16% increase for health insurance, that's out of our hands, correct?
it is. That's the statewide negotiated agreement that we have no say over.
Do our staff put any of their own money towards their insurance, or is it virtually covered by?
No, Tom, would you
Yeah,
explain that, the difference?
all
between
of the groups share in the cost of the premium. So is it 15%?
The teachers and the administrators are at the 80-20, which
yeah.
is what they want everyone to get at. And then the support staff, they were decreasing it by 2% every year. And then with this last negotiated agreement, they said 1%. So I want to say we're at 14 or 13%.
It's just a big bite to swallow.
It is. Every year it's a big bite. This is one of the bigger bites.
Last year we had a lot of issues with the 12%. And everyone said, geez, it can't get worse than that. Oh, they came back 16% this year. And it was like,
And we can't
It's
get the
gonna pass.
change. I'm sure we'll see the change.
Well,
It's mandated by the state.
Right,
You have to
right.
use what they negotiate.
because they negotiated for all of the school districts, all of education.
The presumption was they would do a better job of negotiating. It turned out that hasn't been the case yet.
Not so much.
As it turns out, in year one of this, when they actually went live with it, Jim and I went to a couple of the dog and pony shows, and we're like, yeah, this first year it's costing taxpayers $25 million, and everyone's going, did we save anything? So,
Right.
The presumption was that the state would do a better job than the individual school boards who, were composed of citizens who weren't used to dealing with these issues. And
So do we think our public is well educated?
not who to blame her.
That in fact it's out of our control?
We have attempted to make that point in the past.
And it'll be part of our explanation as we're doing the budget.
Emphasize.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing
Big
is, there was
number.
a really interesting piece yesterday on National Public Radio, just about healthcare infrastructure. And there was a number that was tossed around during that expose in the 50 to 60% range of all healthcare in the country being owned by equity funds, private equity funds. So that's scary, you know. And so, that adds to this pressure.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm positive the employees understand what a valuable benefit that is because
Very.
Oh, yeah.
they share in the cost and commensurately, 15 or 20%, and 15% on a support staff's salary is a significant chunk of change.
Yeah.
I think the benefit plans are almost $40,000, right? The family health
Say a
care.
Family, the gold CHP now, I think is pushing like 35,000.
Yeah. So they're paying a good
So what
percentage
do
of
we
that.
have for recourse? To get back to the legislature and say you're doing a lousy job. I mean, I'm sorry,
that's the fight.
Looking at a 16% increase is,
Well,
To give the devil a due, they're facing some rather formidable headwinds.
we'll see. The reason that meant, when you mentioned that, had to do with that private equity piece, because the biggest lobby that maintains this is them. And they've got more money to burn than, and
They have 16% more money.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, the profit and help
Yeah.
is just,
They did one of the analysis during the conversation was, it's so convoluted that to look at the organization tree of these healthcare companies, 32 pages on average. So you have to read 32 pages to get to the point of, oh, it's owned by who? To get to the root. So it was just fascinating, listening to all that. But that's part of the fight. And our association is pushing, to change, because those numbers that we're seeing now, we didn't encounter just, through Visbit, Vermont Insurance, School Boards Trust. When we were doing our self-insurance, we'd get us 5 or 7, maybe a 10, and I'm thinking over the last, 10 or 12 years. And those were scary. But these are like norm, it's become the norm, and it's real whacked out.
This bit was saying, some of the insurance lines, like the property, the cyber, those are probably, as of right now, they're still working through it, but those are probably going to be a 9%. Everyone said, what do you mean? And I said, well, the thing that I didn't know was that most of the insurance is kind of passed through, so it's not really, what's happening in Vermont, it's what's happening in the US, which obviously,
Reinsurance.
yeah, and they say, we beat up, our reinsurance because they're, hey, we had a pretty good year, but
So
this year with all the floods and everything else, it's.
I'm not playing the game now, but last year when I was negotiating cyber insurance premiums, at that time, the cyber insurance industry was underwater, i.e. they had paid out more in claims than they had taken in revenue, the premium. And it's very hard to continue a business in the face of your expenses are higher than your revenues. And, that is something that the individual has very little sway on. Large organizations have very little sway on it. It really is, how do we as a society decide we're going to react? What resources are we going to bring to bear on the people who are either state sponsored, which much of the cyber world is, criminal world is actually state sponsored, or directly employed. So it's very close. Or is independently. So there was an estimate I saw several years ago. I have no reason to think the estimate did not come true. But at that time, the estimate was that if the cyber criminals were a nation, they would be the third largest economy in the world after the United States and China. That's what we're facing.
It's amazing.
To expect any corporation to be able to prevail in the face of that kind of incentives, it's very difficult.
You know, but one of the things, you know, and I'm going to go to the hopeful side of things. We're fortunate here in Vermont, between UVM and Champlain College, to have two of the preeminent education entities for cybersecurity. Well, actually, three.
Norwich.
You know, I did just, you know, I thought, you know, so we've got Norwich, Champlain, and UVM. And they're turning out some of the best anti-mines, you know, for that work here, right in our own state. And that's why it's being supported by the federal funds, you know, to keep those moving. Does it help this? You know, that's a.
So to say, I don't mind you not being the cybersecurity person.
Yeah, right. So Jake.
Sorry for interrupting.
That's all I got for you tonight.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
So as we start, you know, thinking in terms of our, you know, we've had some pretty good slide presentations over the last, you know, like three years. I think, you know, the template's good, you know, to start with. You know, it's a matter of updating, you know, those data points and looking at the pressure points that we're experiencing this year versus, you know, last. As we start pulling the material for the slides, you know, down. So more fun. Thanks, Jake. Okay. Facilities Committee.
I think that's me.
Both do this.
We met again on Monday, again on the same list that we looked at last Wednesday. And you have the background, so I'm not going to get into the weeds, but we were, you know, looking at life safety, regulatory, and deferred liability options, you know, things that are high priority. Most of the things in the workbooks are a 3 to 5 year immediate need. Like the need is super immediate, right? It's now for some things, and 3 to 5 years at maximum. So our discussion kind of, and I'm gonna glance at Tom's notes because he summarized it really well, formulated around like, how do we pay for this, right? Like there's a conversation where like, do you bond to pay for stuff that is in arrears, you know, like is that valuable money, you know? But also that there needs to be a operational change going forward to support that work ongoing. So kind of our summary is we think that we are looking at a 2 bond cycle for a bond for this fiscal year that would be that would cover both some of these life safety issues and a strategic plan. So along, the design money to do a long-term study, demographics, you've already brought up once. Inflation, you've already brought up once, like all of these intersectional items that have come to kind of a brew now. Like if we take a really long look at what our 20-year plan is, what the needs and the wants are, the revitalization of the front of the high school, middle school area, what all of the different departments are looking to do to expand our offerings. And tie that into a bond that would both give us the money to do some of this immediate maintenance and then decide what's worth funding, right? Like if we're going to do A, then putting money into a broken B is not a good idea. You know what I mean? So, but without all of that information, we don't feel like we can make really good decisions. So it would be a bond this year and then 5 years of planning, studying, taking care of these life safety things, and then presenting an actual, you worded it really well, campus expansion and renovations of our current facilities.
So as we, continue and further the discussion, this is exactly where we were, but we were facing a lot bigger hurdle 13 years ago. And the data speaks for itself. If you look at the amount of investment that this community has made in its infrastructure over that 13-year period, it's in the multi-millions of dollars that were spent. And they did garner a return on that investment because technically, when you look at our enrollments, they are increasing in the demand. Now we have a new piece to the puzzle, that was shared, which is the housing growth in the Upper Valley. And because of our continued, growth and trying to be futuristic for our community so that we don't get saddled with a multi-million-dollar bond to build something new when we don't have to is critical. And I'm really, kudos to the facilities committee to get to that point, because and we're going to have to, hopefully this new firm that we're working with can maybe help us with, like how we start putting that word out, because people really need to know. I mean, I look around the state, $200 million, 60 million, 70 million, and those are just kind of dumping funds into a hole in a way versus.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the things that excites me as a parent about this is just that it gives us a breathing space. It gives us space to do the things that are necessary, but it also gives us a space of time to actually find out what parents are looking for, what athletic sponsors are looking for, what theater what it is that is driving our school wants, and then having them part of that process so that we're not just because the worst is when everybody's like, well, everybody gets a little bit of what they want, and then you get this weird conglomeration of nothing, right, that no one wants, which often happens when designing by committee. But I think this gives us time to stay safe in what we have, but also really thoughtfully look at what we want, and not just what we need, but what we want.
Yeah, and what we foresee for the foreseeable future, like 30, 40 years, so that you know, yes, it's gonna be a large bond, but it's gonna be for the foreseeable future. So we're not doing this, stopgap, $3 million or fix this, you know, it's.
And then there's lots of good things like sustainability efforts, right? Like where can we save money based on fuel differences and solar and all the things, like, there's lots of ways to look at like what our, again, that long-term future thing, like if we switch to pellets from number 2, or, you know, there's just all this that can end up being a cost saving, but we can't get there without,
you know,
evaluating it.
the data.
Yeah, exactly.
And you
it's-
know,
it's just
we're
like programming.
yeah. We're in a good place in that, you know, we have kept our buildings neat, you know, we've kept them up, but they're old.
Yeah.
And we need to really invest in the infrastructure. And we're not talking about tear down and rebuild. We're talking about getting them, you know, making them modern, updating, you know, new life safety equipment, you know, regulatory stuff that we need to do.
And that's the critical piece, you know, the life safety, you know, is right at the very, very top. I mean, when we see entities that haven't done that, they're on the news. And not to say that that's not, hopefully that's not the way we end up having to, you know, make our decisions.
So owning a building is expensive. The only thing really more expensive than owning a building is owning a building that you're not maintaining.
Right.
Because then you really get expensive. That said, given the other increases in costs we're talking about, the economy and the perception of the economy, which are not necessarily the same thing, and so forth, we're going to have to make an extraordinarily careful case to the public about what we are doing and why we are doing it. And it's easy for us to realize, looking at the travails of some of our fellow school boards, who, as you mentioned, are having to figure out how to replace an entire building, as opposed to putting in some new insulation, upgrading the wiring, upgrading the sensor systems for fire and smoke and things like that. You know, fixing the wear and tear that just accumulates, but actually having to replace an entire building. You can see why our investment has been a good investment. But there is a real perception, unfortunately, and I run into this all the time in the professional world, as I'm sure you do. We just replaced it. When you're here again, I already bought that. Why do I need to do it again?
I've heard several
hear that
people
all
call
the time.
Dothan Brook the new school. And I'm like, that school was built the year I graduated from high school.
Yeah.
So it's not new.
Yeah.
As much as I'd love to say it was.
Yeah, it's literally 30 years old.
Yeah.
And we've done very little to it.
Yeah.
You know.
And then, you know, that story, we talk a lot about that, right? Like what is in it for an individual? Like that's because that's key to anything, you know, and like there's lots of fun stories to tell about new stuff. And that's where people want to hear, and that's what they want to like talk about. But it's hard to sell tires. You know what I mean? But if you don't have them.
Well, part of that impetus too, again, you know, is our growth. If you look at the physical design of those buildings, they were designed to absorb the numbers that we're seeing coming. So that being said, because I mean, those of us that remember, my daughter's graduating class, bless your heart, my daughter's graduating class was 332.
Wow.
Okay, it was the biggest class we had. Okay, and that was 2006. No, wait, Angie was okay. It was in that range, you know, because they were 2 years apart. So it was like 206, you know, and it was the biggest class we had.
It's huge. Yeah.
I feel like Nate has like 90.
Okay.
But usually our classes lately have been 130
Okay, so maybe it's more than
ish.
that.
Yeah,
So imagine.
they
the high
pick up a
school-
bunch at the 9th grade,
Oh,
10th grade
Yeah.
from the sending towns, you know, tuition towns.
So just think of that building accommodated that number.
Yeah.
So when we look at, it's a question of how do we configure it? You know, if,
It's also a value to parents though, to have these 16 kids in a class and not 30.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, there is so much value in the educational experience of a small class size.
yeah, well, the thing is, the classes were done well.
Good.
As far as the numbers.
Yeah.
That's my point, is that we still managed to accommodate that. There weren't,
35 kids.
Right.
If the projections and the building permits that are being discussed happen, it's gonna be a problem to deal with. It's a really good problem to have compared to the alternative version, which is,
Right.
guess what? The population is dropping, the number of students is dropping, and we need to.
And you still
support
need to maintain.
all that infrastructure on a base instead of 3,000 students, you need to do it on 1,200 students, or however the numbers work out, and the number keeps on going down. That's what results in you having to make very unhappy decisions about who loses an elementary school or things like that. Having started playing this game as coach did at a time in which there was a very credible process underway to close buildings. That's not a place I want to be in. So I'm not terribly upset that we have this to deal with,
Yeah,
given the alternative.
Well,
I think
for the population, of New Hartfordians, having a picture, and it doesn't have to be a 20-year, like look back, but just over, a 10-year, like span to show, because everybody's hearing, in the news, there's less kids and all of this, so why? We have the data.
that's the
that
next
shows-
item. We're gonna talk about that a little bit.
But, but
Yeah, you
that's,
got big plans.
that's the piece for me, because
Yeah.
dealing with it at the legislative level, data is king in my estimation, because if you can't back it up with the facts, it's just glam,
I think that's what this 2-bond cycle does for us too,
Right.
right? It's like we have an immediate need that we need to fulfill, and we're spending some of that money to do a very thoughtful plan for the future.
because that's what we did, before. We spent a sizable amount of money on that engineering analysis that told us where we were.
One of the things we don't want to do is have to fix something now and then it's removed or replaced if we do a larger renovation in a few years. So we're trying to be super thoughtful about what we might need to do in the very near future. So
What's the rework cost?
and there is a lot of that in the district. So unlike any time in our past, we're really being proactive to look at, the future needs and not do anything now that we're going to undo.
I look
So,
forward to seeing.
It's quite complicated, but
No,
one of the things you
reality.
missed, unfortunately, Peter, last time was we did a deep dive into the current state of the facilities. So linked in this report, those two spreadsheets, I think, would be really informative to you or anybody out there who's listening.
I'm looking forward to it.
Because we had the now deferred maintenance that's got to be taken care of, the priorities in that first one, and then the larger look at the whole district.
And I'd be happy to nerd out if you have any
Yeah.
questions afterwards, because
Jonathan,
that's what I did.
Jonathan Garthwaite did
I'm
a
aware.
Yeah, he did a really nice job
did.
of putting that together, and then he also prioritized the needs based on those items in the next bullet there. Safety, regulatory, and deferred liability, which he, in his world, and Sarah's too, they get very concerned about, because deferred liabilities, they don't go away, they just get bigger and
More
and
expensive.
more
Mhm.
liability.
Mhm.
So it was a nice way to lay it out. And basically, things that had more than one check got into the priorities. So that's how we're looking at it. But if you want some background on how we got where we got, that's it. Yeah, I think good. So the facilities team will have to meet regularly now to develop that first bond, because the bond season is right around the corner.
So,
Any questions or?
Yeah. So I think just as a logistic, any of the information that can be shared, as we move forward, that doesn't, let's say, get to the um, executive session level, of sharing, because there are those things that can. My suggestion would be making sure that we have a link to the rest of the board, to the shared file, just
Mhm.
so that, if we have one of those weird moments where you go, I want to check this out, and you can go, oh, okay, it just helps, you know.
Yeah. We'll know all of this is here now, so you
Yeah.
can
right,
dig into that.
And just a reminder, there's no wants on these lists.
Mm.
These are
These are needs. Yeah.
needs.
I understand. Make it a little easier to explain, but only a little.
I know,
Right.
nobody wants to spend money on boring stuff.
Yeah. But there's that other piece, and I think that, our folks that do the sharing of information every day will help us with how we talk to our fellow
Yeah.
residents.
All right. Thank you.
And thank to you guys for taking on the facilities piece, and I should catch up with you after. So,
Poured out on
the next
policy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was waiting for permission. It was interesting to see recently that one of the other districts in this state of ours got a lot of credit for being the very first district in the state to have a policy around gender equity, trans students, and so forth. And as I said, somewhat sarcastically to our fellow members of the board, I guess when we came out with ours, we were so far ahead of everybody else that they sort of forgot we were also in the race.
Right.
Well, just like we need to return to things and figure out how to deal with maintenance and so forth, we need to return to our policies from time to time. And this is actually the third time that we will have returned to this particular subject. We have a great group of people who are working together to draft the policy, and they have put together a
extraordinarily well-written document, but despite the fact that it's well-written, it isn't necessarily in the form that needs to be a policy. Policies need to be very economic with their use of words. They are much less about persuading people than directing people, constraining people, encouraging people. So we are taking what is a very powerful document and getting it down to the bones so it will actually work as a policy statement. Much of the work that went into explaining the reasoning behind the policy, I'm encouraging that we put it into a second document, which sort of becomes the why document. But we're now trying to create the what document. And so yesterday we met for several hours and went through for the second time, taking that document and trying to transition it into being the what document. And I think we are making very good progress on it, but it is not ready for prime time yet. So that's basically the report.
And just so that people know, and I'm really proud of our work around policy, here, because we've been fortunate to have an incredible dearth of resources, to help us with some of these tough, questions, these policy issues, be it our transgender piece, be it, our racial equity piece. We've just been really blessed, with having some good support folks. We had 2 Schweitzer fellows actually help us develop and design that racial equity. And then they became, entrepreneurs doing it all over New England and the rest of the country. So, again, we were fortunate, and we kind of pioneered it in a way, just like with this one.
Right. The document is, I think, going to be a very good document. Unfortunately, we live in times where we need a very good document.
So good work.
Yeah, thank you to
That
the
group as well.
committee and to Peter.
So that brings us to an interesting discussion, because we've been kind of dancing around it as we've gone through gone through the agenda. So Tom, would you?
Absolutely. So what you see on the screen and in your packet tonight is that's a conglomeration at the top of the words that came up when the elementary administrators and district administrators met last week in a retreat for several hours, and we did what used to be called a SWOT analysis. It's now a SOAR analysis. So we've been really concerned about our model for elementary schools, the catchment areas. The town is divided up into 3 catchment areas: the White River, Ottaquechee, and Dothan Brook catchment areas. And that was done probably 15 years ago, and it's worked very, very well, I believe, for the district. And because they're not the same size in any way, shape, or form. They're based on the number of people in each part of town and the size of the school in that part of town, and they've worked well. It's amazing how well they've worked to balance the enrollment in each of the 3 elementary schools. But in the very near future, the now I like to call it, we have 348 units that are somewhere in the construction process in town. That's a lot of units. Sort of unprecedented for the recent decade, that kind of growth. 100 units are currently under construction. So that alone is significant. Those are 1, 2, and some 3-bedroom units. 258 units are in the process, in the permitting process now. And all of the developments are in the current White River School catchment area. So that's also sort of hard to believe because that's our smallest elementary school. And their enrollment has recently really rebounded. They're near 200 this year, which they haven't been for quite a few years. So that, forces the question of, are those catchment areas that have worked so well for the last decade and a half, that's not going to be satisfactory in the near future. There's also pre-K legislation mandating that all 4-year-olds can have going to have a full day program. So that puts some pressure on us because right now, even though we have 5 out of 6 pre-K programs are all day, we have 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and there's a waiting list of 20 people. So next year, we're not going to be able to have that waiting list with 4-year-olds on it. You're going to have to serve them. What are you going to do with the 3-year-olds? Just say, sorry, can't come. So we got an expansion problem there, which is, it's really a good problem to have for me because, and everything I know about education, pre-K is where it's at. We want to do the best job we possibly can to meet those students' needs academically and social emotionally, because that sets us up for a lot of success, in the years after that. And we already know, as I said, there's identified weaknesses and inequities in our current delivery model. So although we've done well and we do some things, very well, we also know that because of the way we're structured, we hit the wall at certain age levels in each building. For instance, 2nd grade this year at the Queechee School, kindergarten this year at the White River School, 22 classes, both are at 20. Kid moves in, we're like, it's stressful. We're like, what are we going to do with him? How are we going to meet his or her needs? It's nothing that we outwardly display, but I'm sure there's an undercurrent of how are we going to meet this child's needs. We don't want to do that. So combined with the growth, we want to work on how we're providing the most equitable possible experience for families and young children as they enter our school district. So the want of the elementary administrators, and certainly myself, is in that first statement, which is to allow us to develop an RFP, or request for proposals, to try to find a search, not a search team, but a research firm that can look at our current enrollment, our future enrollment, our facilities, and the capacity of those facilities, and try to make some recommendations around, how should we shift the catchment areas, but also maybe reconfigure the age spans of our current schools, and really look at that sort of purely. Is it the right model to do 3 pre-K, 6, 5 schools? Is there some other model that could provide that more equitable experience and better meet the needs of our enrollment and certainly our future sort of expansion of enrollment? And this leads right into like that whole facility project. Like, we need to know this information. What's coming down the pike? In the years I've been here, a few, board members who've been on the board for a while, I think the first concern I dealt with was this issue: catchment areas, current schools, capacity. And we sort of settled that by really, renovating the White River School and better meeting the needs in the existing facilities. But here we are again, 13 years later, with similar need. At that time, the impetus for the change was a little bit more declining enrollment. we had a concerted effort years ago to increase enrollment. And it worked, I think. For the most part, it really worked. We enhanced our curb appeal. We strategically made some changes in staffing and in our facilities that I think have made us very attractive in our programming, very attractive to other districts and sending towns. And our enrollment's at the highest it's been, I think, since I've been here. This year, 1,850, pre-K 12. And it actually could be higher if we had more capacity, especially at the pre-K level, because we have about 20 kids on the waiting list, or had 20 kids. So that's huge.
So, quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What is the expected cost of this?
Probably the last time I did one of these, it was $15,000, $20,000. We're asking for a little more than the usual enrollment trend study, because we really want to know, like, some research supported, data supported models that have worked.
And
And not putting any limitations on there. We don't want to say, well, we want three pre-K 6 schools. We want.
There's got to be an Imagineering in this as well, and it's not just Disney Imagineering. This is education Imagineering.
The thing that's unique right now is that this 348 units are all in the White River catchment area. So how do we?
There's a reason that's happened. And it's not accidental.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, for a long time I was in the planning commission, so I was infinitely acquainted with this. The state has done a lot of things to try to direct all growth within the state to take place within what they call growth areas. And there are a lot of good reasons that you might want to do this. If you can concentrate growth in the downtown areas, there is already existing sewage, electricity, water provided, streets and so forth. They don't have-
Transportation.
Walkability.
Exactly. There are lots of very good things associated with that. Additionally, if you're a state that prides itself on the open spaces and nature and all of those things, clustering people together preserves that appearance and the appeal of the land, the lifestyle we want to have when we come to live here, and so forth. But it does have also consequences. And one of those consequences is that when people move to Heartland, they move to a specific part of Heartland instead of doing it in a more spread out and sort of sporadic way that would allow us potentially to absorb this a lot more easily, because it'd be a few of this school, a few of this school, a few of that school. This goes, no, you're all going into. So it's not entirely accidental that this has happened.
Some of us like to be city people.
And what's fascinating in all of this are the numbers. And for folks that will want to know answers to the why, the data that we could provide will answer those questions. And so when I think about it, to be able to say to someone, one of the immediate responses or results of that type of study is our ability to accept those additional students. And when I think about our revenue, just numbers, not the kids, as far as, what we're doing academically, but how we provide that. 14.3 per student right now is the number roughly. So for each student that we ensure has a good seat and a reputable seat in our structure nets us that. So,
Yes.
to spend, $15 to even $20,000 to ensure that we do that piece right.
There's another reason to do it right. Let me comment after you make your.
I was just curious what the current models are beyond elementary, middle, high. Like when I was a kid, there was lots of primary schools that were like K3, and then you went to elementary school, and then you went to junior high, which was just 7, 8, 9. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the other models are like right now.
Yeah, some districts do, pre-K 12s. I mean, some do, pre-K 4s, have a middle school that's 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
Junior high is not
Not a thing
really
anymore.
in a thing. A lot of districts have, pre-K 8.
I was a K8 kid
Yeah.
in middle school.
Middle school educators are very passionate. Happen to be married to one. I was one for a while, about having those students, together. 5, 6, 7, 8, or 6, 7, 8.
Just developmentally.
Developmentally.
Yeah.
The shoulder areas, 9th grade, I always wonder if 9th grade really should be in the middle school. They're very young. They go to the high school. And it takes them that whole year to get sorted out. And then 10th grade, miraculously, they've grown up and they're doing well. But 9th grade, yeah.
I went to a junior high that went through 9th grade.
Yeah,
Sixth
7, 8,
grade
9 was
honors.
junior high in
Yeah.
North Carolina. Yeah.
I've always been concerned here that 6th grade is too young, to be at the middle school. I don't know if we have the capacity at the elementaries, but so there's
There's lots of models.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a lot of models.
There are.
Yeah.
So-
And given the catchment area problem, I think, that there could be a model that's different, very different from what we currently do.
There's a very practical reason I'm supporting this idea, which is that as all of us as parents know, the community associated with the school is a very precious thing. We choose in part where we live, depending on which school we're going to want our children to go to. We may have family that's gone to a school for many generations. When you start mixing up where students go and redefining those lines, you inevitably run into people who are going to be very unhappy because they wanted their child to go to Northbrook. They did not want their child to go to the Ottaquiki school, and they would have lived somewhere else if they knew that they were going to end up. So it really behooves us to have the data and the information and the arguments so that we can respond to that turmoil which we will create if we have to deal with this by redrawing those lines in as intelligent and an informed way as we can.
Yeah. One of the things that's really resonated with me and certainly with the elementary principals is around, really living and practicing what we preach. We've been really moving along in our equity work. And we feel like having 3 elementary schools serving the same age groups at times just sort of forces an inequitable experience, whether it's capacity or staffing patterns or development in those parts of town. So there is a real desire to sort of level the playing field and provide a very equitable experience for every kid. One of the things that happens now is resources are scarce, and we use the resources that the community and you all provide to us as best we can. But by having 3 elementary schools, we're forced to have certain staff traveling from school to school to school. That we feel strongly is a waste of resources. If all of the pre-K1 students were in the same place, we really could, focus and do the best job we possibly can with the staff who specialize in that area at that school. Right now, they're sort of shifted all over the place. And even if we do, 2 days at Dothan and 2 days at Ottaquechee and 1 day at White River, it's still not the best. Not the best.
The specialists are
So
moving.
we love the idea of trying that. And I know it would be hard for folks in town, but as far as what's best for the kids, if you could have all the pre-K students together, we could have all the people who specialize and really want to support that age group together. So those are things that we want the study to touch on is what's the most equitable way to do this? Obviously, we don't want to get people very angry like when I started in the district 13 years ago. I mean, it was, yeah, there's articles I could share with you.
When we moved here, we were told we would either be at the White River School or the Ottaquechee School, and we had just moved here, and the Ottaquechee School felt like 700 miles away from where I lived, right? So I am going to throw out the parent concept of the kids that my kids know when they're little live very near to the kids that like my kid's best friend lives on Maple Street, and it's a 2-minute drive, and if Fairview Terrace was open, it'll be a 1-minute drive. So like they're in that young, super young age, like with Nathan, like driving him 25 minutes to the depths of Quechee Lakes is different than with Zachary, right? Like, so it's just that there's
It's gonna make it a hard.
it is
talk about,
that it's just something to think
It's a
about.
very
Is
hard
about like
thing,
that really like until they're 10, the play date stuff is a big part of their lives. So
And the catchment lines have always been difficult.
Especially here, having, we've all had to deal with it at different stages and times. But, Hartford, as it's, been flexing and emerging, it's been a difficult thing to wrap, our arms around, just the location, of Dothanbrook when Dothanbrook, was being discussed, after being on the hill at the base, of Christian Street, and then, we had the Wilder School, we had, we even had more infrastructure. And deciding to move that infrastructure to absorb the numbers that we had where they were, we just need to make sure that good energy is spent around this next set of decisions because they are so difficult.
and don't outweigh the benefit of the town people, right? Like, so the high school and the middle school are already in White River. And so if you set a set of Quechee parents up to spend 13 years focusing their entire lives in White River Junction is also like a hard, you know what I mean? I just like, so if you're in Quechee and your kids K2 at the White River School, and then they're 3, 4, and 5 at the Ottaquechee School, and then they're back to the middle school and the high school, like that's a big ask. A 20-minute drive when I get the advantage of a 2-minute drive. And so I'm just throwing that out there too. It's like,
it's another piece.
when you look at that equity.
Which is another reason the more information we have. More detail.
Well,
I'm for it. I'm all for it.
We need the information.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of it too is going back to what Sarah and I talked about with the facilities report is that when we're contemplating, major bond initiatives, what if the study says something, some sort of different use for one of our buildings? We certainly don't want to renovate it for what it is currently used for. And then, 3 years down the road go, we really need to repurpose that for, and it's not,
Doesn't have the right bathrooms. It doesn't have the right layout.
So we want to be very thoughtful about our future sort of growth or expansion.
that's why it's critical
Yeah,
to have. We'll just say that all of this is intentional. You know, if anybody's, you know, like watching, you know, and it's that critical to each piece of this discussion, because that number that is solid, and that doesn't even talk about future. You know, this is just what we know right at the moment. And we also know that there are going to be some very large expenditures of additional funds for housing that don't even, they're not in this list because they haven't been actuated yet. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And
yes,
I'd like to move that we authorize the staff to develop a request for proposal for enrollments, for enrollment study.
Second.
so we have a motion and a second to ensure that we create an enrollment study RFP. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
thank you so much. Great.
I know it was a little involved discussion, but I think that's important for our, you know, our fellow Hartford residents to hear that part of the discussion.
And just for the record, I did say aye, even though I was trying to fight a cough at the same time. So it didn't come out quite as properly as it might.
Well, and all those considerations, not to bring that Sarah brought up about being a parent and where your kids go to school, that's part of it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be trade-offs, but we also have to have all the information so we can make an informed decision.
And that's why that selection of an entity that has done that level of introspective look, you know, around these, because, you know, that's where the rubber hits the road, you know. I mean, if somebody's moving into a community, one of the first, remember when the realtors, you know, like came, you know, before the President Realtors Association, this was just before COVID, you know, they came and they wanted to talk about, you know, how important we are to their work. And one of the first questions that families ask that realtor isn't how much did that building cost? What's the quality of the school? You know, and so, and then the discussion goes from there. So, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, just which analysis tool did you use? You said it wasn't the SWOT. It's been
The SOARs,
source.
yeah. That was,
Could you explain that for folks?
Yeah, let me
Because
actually-
we use the acronyms
yeah.
a lot, and
I'm gonna bring
the old method SWOT was strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
yeah. I am gonna just,
Strengths, opportunities, affiliations, and results.
and yeah, now ours was strength, opportunities, aspirations. Yeah. And
After you get hit, you get sore.
strength, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So it was great. It was a great process, similar to a SWOT, but more up to date. And we spent a while. We had lots of strengths, so I don't want people to think we just picked apart what we do. We had tons of strengths and tons of strengths for each school. You know, but
it's a good process. You know, I think, you know, when people see the due diligence that goes into, you know, some of the decisions, that's really important, you know, too. And you know, that's why I just wanted to have it, you know, like explained. So if somebody goes back, or if somebody says, so, well, what did you guys do? How did that come up with that? Go to the November 8th meeting.
Mm.
And just listen to the section. Look at the agenda. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but if you're curious about a certain portion, you can watch that on tape and hopefully
One of the
educate yourself.
one of the first things I did when I arrived 13 years ago was a SWAT process with the community, if you remember.
Yeah.
We had chart paper back then, and we set up in the cafeterias of the schools and ran a SWAT on the strengths of the current model. So sort of interesting.
Progress. So the next item is the superintendent search firm proposals. We got a number of those in. The due date, was the 30th, and there is a range. You'll notice in the minutes there is a spreadsheet. That gives us an overview of each, of the, proposals. We were very specific, about what we were looking for as far as our ask, and what our expectation was for each. And the information speaks for it. So, Tom, would you like to share?
Yeah, I put the firms that responded to our RFP and the cost of each. And again, each firm is extremely reputable in the business. They're all four are ones that any superintendent who's been around for a bit is familiar with. Human Resources Enterprise is a national firm. They do searches all over the place. So all the superintendents and administrators get regular emails from Hank Harris, who's the executive director of Human Resource Enterprises. So extremely reputable. NESDAQ, New England School Development Council, is also very familiar to any superintendent or administrator. They do searches mostly in New England, all over New England. We get regular emails for various administrative positions that are doing searches, districts doing searches. Obviously, VSBA is a state organization. They probably do most of the searches in Vermont that we're familiar with. McPherson and Jacobson is a private firm, but they do a few searches in Vermont. It's a national firm, but they've become somewhat prevalent in Vermont, and they do a really nice search. They're doing Middlebury. VSBA right now is doing 2 searches in Vermont, Danville and Lincoln. McPherson and Jacobson are doing Middlebury superintendent search. Other than that, I think those are the 3 that are going on right now.
So the School Boards Association is doing a number of them as well.
Yeah, they have 2 searches going on right now. They have 3 former superintendents who do the searches, lead the searches. All 3 I know well, and they do a fine job. So they combine VSBA's sort of rubric process with some of the things they learned from being a superintendent for a long time. So I think you have 4 really good choices. I don't know how I can help you.
Do we have a rubric of any kind? Like, because for me, a lot of it's like, what's the change order, right? Like, this is your base rate, but like the survey's included in this one and not included in this one on that community. Like, I'm not I'm not sure what our evaluation rules are, I guess, being new to the
Right.
board, how,
So that's a very good question. Are they a similar question or at least a question that we should answer before we make a decision, which is who are we trying to recruit and from where? Are we trying to say we would like somebody from New England who understands our way of doing things and our people, and therefore will put up with, you know, and with that, are we wanting somebody who is going to come from outside our enclave, who is going to bring in new thoughts and new ways of doing things and a different experience, and not speak to us in language that we necessarily understand so easily? You know, we can be a tough crowd to impress sometimes if you're seen as an outsider. It's not always a good thing, but maybe that's what we need. Have we had any thought about what we're trying to do? So make it possible for us to recruit minorities. We're just looking in, we're gonna have a very hard time recruiting any minorities. Looking elsewhere. So sort of that decision should in part drive some of the thoughts we have about these firms and where they can recruit from and where they're used to recruiting from.
Well, just a quick initial response is when we look at, the provider requirements, the proven track record of successful searches, of course, knowledge of where to post the positions search for maximum benefit. So part of what we would want to see, is how far reaching, even though they're anchored here, maybe in New England, do they have that national credibility as far as being able to reach out to the limits, of or that's a critical piece, I think, to the discussion. And that was one of the things that we were looking for in our discussion, as a board, to do they always go to, those national entities where people look to in general, but what else? Do they go to the historically Black, colleges? Do they go to some of those other graduate school entities that generate superintendents, and also have that capacity, to, create superintendents? That's another piece, to it. And some of that's, pretty clearly stated in their proposals.
I mean, I'd like someone who's going to think about the job description itself from an equity place, I mean, as someone who's from away, a lot of what you hear when you move here is you don't have the tradition, you don't have the this, but we are not that area anymore. Like with the college and the Upper Valley itself, like I would say that the forevers and the new people are much more equally balanced than people think they are in their head, right? And so I would really want to look at not a job description that's like traditional New England towns. I mean,
No, that's why I raised.
yeah, no, I feel really strongly about answering this question.
And one of the reasons I asked it is, we had a chief of police who was hired from Maryland of all places. A part of the country that is in many ways extremely different from this. And he turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to this town, in my opinion. So thinking about that more broadly in that way, I think could have advantages. But we need to actually ask the question and answer it.
Well, I think to Sarah's point and to your point, we're not restricting ourselves at all. If anything, we're saying you need to show us that you've had a proven track record of, reaching out past. Who's to say where the finalist might end up coming from?
Absolutely.
But if the initial ask is to everyone who potentially could, then we've done due diligence, on that end. I think that's a critical piece to the puzzle.
And I just don't know, do our colleagues from the Vermont School Boards Association have the experience reaching out that far?
No.
Yeah.
At least that's my impression. If they don't go far enough.
Right.
And we also have a group that goes, I think, too far.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, we've got extremes. We
You
definitely
got
have
the
milk.
extremes, yes.
We definitely have milk.
Yeah. And this becoming a whole science of
Oh, yeah.
recruiting, minority, not so much minority anymore, but, historically marginalized folks. I just attended a 4-hour workshop yesterday from NEMNET, which is a national, firm that does work with recruiting, historically marginalized groups. The instructor was in Switzerland. And it was very, very well done. Soup to nuts on how to recruit folks from different parts of the country and support them, or different parts of the world and then support them well so they stay. From the wording of the advertisements to the questions that you ask during an interview, it's really good stuff.
And I mean, these guys don't have anything in New England. New York, Connecticut. Not that I want to be exclusively New England, but like,
You want to have.
I want to have
But
some
they-
experience.
Right.
I also kind of want to see a small state, which they don't have a lot of, right? Because I think that's a vibe that like matters, you know?
They are doing Middlebury's right now.
But here again, one of the things that, just thinking about your question, and I'm not, like locked into any, but just responding to that part of the question is when I look at their breakdown, we see schools that they're working with from as few as 470 students to, as many as 188,000.
Right.
As far as, but the bulk of them, are actually smaller than those big ones.
Yeah.
When you look at it, those are the outliers at the far left of the, the demographic. But, most of them are around 5,000 students, 1,000 students. If somebody did a math average, even with the big ones, you'd find that they actually are servicing, districts.
So if I may state a heresy, it'll probably get me run out down on the rail. I don't think we should take into account cost, given the range that they're showing.
Oh, yeah.
Look at what you pay for.
Yeah, well, not even that, but the difference between 9,000 and 28,000, given what we're doing, it's
Nothing.
nothing. And what we really, so that should not be a factor in determining which of these. It would be nicer if we paid less, but that's not important
compared to making sure that the real resources we want brought to this are brought to this. Unless it's an indicator that, gee, they really don't have much in the way of a staff to support, and really can't bring anything because, you know, it takes money to do the searches.
So, you know, in that sense, and getting back to, you know, like Sarah's point and yours as well. And as I look at the timeline, you know, and you know, some people would say, geez, you know, that was a pretty thick document that they sent. But when I look at all searches listed are for school superintendents unless otherwise noted. So they've got pages of success with numbers, again, varying from, you know, as few as, you know, 400 or 500 to districts our size, all over the place in, you know, different parts of the country. And what's interesting when we think about equity for our students and equity for Vermonters, that picture has changed so drastically nationally. And the conversations, even though the conversations have kind of subsided, that desire is still there, you know, for creating an environment where all of our kids, be them our kids or our grandkids or our friends' kids, are treated the same in all of our schools.
I would like to suggest, should be down at this point, that we actually go and create a rubric. So staffing size. Too small staff, maybe they can't do it if their other workload is too large. Geographic spread, all of these things that sort of should go into this. And I think, quite frankly, also we should have a 1 to 4 rating from the superintendent over what his opinion is with regards to this, that we can blend into that. But we should be sort of thinking about what issues we care about. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but we should be clear on why we're making the choice to work on ourselves.
I'd like to see a apples for apples too, like how we like is this $16,000 includes 2 town meetings, the $9,000 doesn't include any town meetings, the 10, you know, I'm making those up. I'm not.
Yeah, I understand.
No,
But
that's,
I'd like to see where my change orders are gonna come in, right? Cause like, oh, great, $9,000, except that all of the things are important to us,
Yeah,
Cost more
I
money.
looked at one.
are
of those.
extra,
Yeah,
right?
I looked at very briefly. I haven't
Yeah.
really had a chance to peruse it at all, but the cost was low until you realize that any additional hours are $190 an hour.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going, they're clearly making their money expecting us to go over
Right.
the benefits, you know.
Yeah. And I would hope that your, you know, your DEI work, which has just been so near and dear to all of us the last several years, is a prominent place on that rubric somehow.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Whether it's, you know, how the firm handles to that and make sure that we're doing a good job,
Is there any mention at
or the
all?
recruitment.
Right, there's,
of-
I mean, some of them have diversity statements that are more like, we wanna reach to a lot of people versus specifically targeting, you know, underserved populations.
And so I think we are kind of pressed in a way, you know, and I guess I have to do that reality piece, you know, because my colleague sitting to my left is looking at me, okay, how much longer are we gonna stretch this out? So, and that wasn't in any way weird, you know, I'm feeling that pressure, you know, as well. Let's at least come up with the framework, just make a list of things. And then not, if we need to call a special meeting we can do one. Okay, and all that would take, is, because it would be an emergency meeting. But I'd like to, it needs to be that intense, okay, and that intentional. And it might not require us to have to come out again now that we've got, these other tools. We might be able to do it just from Tom's office, and as long as we have a site that anybody can go to, we've lived up to our expectation. So we just log on to Zoom, we've got the documents, or the document, which would be the spreadsheet that does the analysis of the rubric, and we can go, okay, that answered that question. Yeah. But I can see where that's gonna, if we've got change orders, as you said, or add-ons,
Right.
Of any kind. So, what if, knowing what we did the first time around, I could already see that some of them didn't think that piece in. They do cover it through that $199 an extra hour. But when we did it the first time, the first set of meetings was in each of the elementary schools, the middle school, and then the high school. So we actually met in all, or the committee met in each of those areas to do their work, their canvassing piece. So, and there were, so you figure that's 3, 4, 5, individual sessions. And I didn't quite see that, delineated, there. And then on the other end of the process, once we got the finalists, lined up, we did the elementary schools. So they were introduced, the final candidates were introduced at each of the elementary schools, middle school.
The process when Doug and Amelia were hired was amazing from a parent perspective. Like, I knew I was only gonna get a specific principal because I knew.
That's my process.
But I'm just saying, like, that kind, like, a listening session where I'm listening to somebody talk, and then, like, I don't know that I have a voice in, I don't know that they actually want my opinion, but maybe they do, and there's a sticky board or something, but like that interactive, like, I mean, Doug had us like lined up on the middle of the classroom doing ridiculous stuff, but it was so engaging.
Right.
I mean,
and see, each candidate does that piece differently.
Yeah.
Okay, and when we did the superintendent search, it was interactive, and that's why I think we need to ask those quick questions for the rubric, so that as we're building our decision, we can say, this company can facilitate that process.
Yeah.
And this is.
So
I mean, you could also interview folks or interview firms if you narrowed it down or wanted to talk with someone personally,
so
ask them questions.
a lot of HR efforts these days are a computerized review of a resume where they're looking for keywords. Something I think is absolutely useless.
Oh yeah.
We don't want that. So I think what you just talked about is, what does the firm know about us? So they can then find something that fits us. This is a very valid point. Because quite frankly, having been on the school board now for as long as I have, I'm sure you're probably better at this than I am. I'm not sure I could define us easily just sitting down and doing it. I'd have to do a lot of thinking about it, and I think that is not going to be easy part.
I don't know what's legal and what's not legal. But I'm gonna put it out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've actually had some people speak to me, and they have concerns that everybody has a chance at this position if they're qualified. In essence, they were trying to communicate to me, they were concerned that we would not be seeing any minorities. And I don't know what the answer is. I
No, well, the answer is, I won't say what the answer is, because
We're not going to exclude candidates who might benefit us based on arbitrary things like that.
right. You know, and it's so hard because, you know, people are growing right now, Doug, you know,
right.
you know, as far as their understanding of what equity or inclusion is all about.
Mhm.
And, you know,
I'll be right back.
sure, you know, and that change, you know, is so difficult for some of, you know, our, you know, our fellow community members, you know. So I can understand the question, and I think we'll be able to answer that, you know, fairly easily. Because that was a requirement in the original RFP. So, Tom, would you mind taking some notes as far as some of those rubric questions? Sarah, would you start with a couple of points you'd like to make sure?
I would just like to have a section where we can compare offerings. So included, not included, and if not included, at what cost? Because I think we have to decide which of the offerings are important to us. Like, is an online survey going to get us anywhere versus meetings in the schools, or what those are, right? And then for me, and I've obviously, like Peter said, I've done a skim, but not like a dig in. But I do want to see kind of what their regional versus national reach is. And then, you know, just share logistics. Like, are they gonna come here once? If they're, you know, are they gonna fly here once and then we're gonna have a bunch of awkward Zoom meetings? Are they gonna be engaged with our community, or are they gonna, does that make sense? I don't know how to phrase that. Stand off,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, I have the advantage of just being on the town manager search committee and like having Dominic in the state able to come. I mean, he wasn't here every time because he's in St. Albans, but like, having someone who was like kind of invested in kind of babying us through it.
Well, our search.
Yeah.
Our search.
Yeah.
Whoever it is. You know, and having done a number of these, just finished one a few months ago, you know, as well. On the national, you know, like having, you know, that catered support, you know, is critical, you know, to get to where we want to be. So I think that's a valid question.
And you know, the new community safety or community wellness review that has been accepted by the select board is also something that whoever, like, there's someone is actually, one of these proposals, and I can't remember which one, actually talks about a community needs assessment. And so like that directs me, that puts me in a place where I'm like, you're at least thinking the way my town is thinking right now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that global perspective.
Yeah.
And having the horsepower to go, duh, this is what we should be helping them with.
Well, how can we move this along? I mean, do you want to have a special meeting sometime next week or the week after to really hammer it out?
Well, I'd say we could, you know, depending, you know, on schedule, is pull a special meeting together. And I guess this is an ask, you know, to you, Tom, because you've you know, like, had all of this in front of you, and you know, if you were able to, you know, get, you know, like maybe Alicia to help you, you know, just because of your schedule.
Next week is like,
you know,
literally don't even have 1 second.
Well, that's why I said that. You know,
awful. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people I've said, no, schedule into the next week, because I just can't do
so that's why I'm saying,
it. Yeah.
you know, let's be, you know, intentional about that, you know, as well. And being that Alicia and Emily did the pre-reads, you know, with us,
Mm.
she's actually got an idea, you know, of, you know, the 4 docs. So if we can come up with, you know, our asks, it should be.
Maybe I could put together a Google Doc for you to dump your ideas into. I don't think that's a violation of anything.
No.
You know, a working document, you can
Right.
dump in your thoughts about what should be asked, and then I can keep refining them and put that into a spreadsheet and sort of check.
Mm.
Or if one of us, Alicia or I, might be more appropriate for Alicia to
Right.
call,
And I
make some calls and say, these are the questions the board has.
you know, because she's our human resources director as
Yeah.
well, you know, that I think, you know, just thinking about the optics and all of those
Yeah,
pieces
and the optics for
makes-
me are not
right.
good.
Right.
Right.
And that's why I went that direction specifically.
Mm.
So,
Yet at the same time, you've run lots of searches.
Yeah.
And you can perhaps inform us as to what characteristics you found useful.
Yeah.
What elements you found useful.
Well, we've refined the process over the years to, you know, we've attracted a lot of really good people. And Sarah mentioned it, and that's how that's evolved. So we have like a whole array of activities to get at what we're looking for.
Right.
And the DEI stuff has become, you know, a huge
Do you
component.
have that in the document?
Yeah, do you have a rubric?
I certainly have quite a bit. Yeah, probably have a rubric that we could adapt.
Because I feel like for me anyway, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like if we come up with like 8 points that we want to
Yeah.
compare on, and then I would love to have the 8 points to sit down while I'm doing my work, so that I'm not, you know, like I'm bringing my like internal scoring, and then we can score kind of how we
Yeah.
are seeing
I
it as
don't
a
want a
group.
huge list of
Right.
this.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I think if you sort of created the list between, you know, say through next week, and we did a really fine job of putting that list together, then the following week, we really hammer out. I think you're gonna have to talk to some of these firms, someone is,
Well,
because it doesn't come out. It
And I'm
feels a
gonna
little,
assume
feels
it
a little
meets the
boilerplatey.
meets the basic request of the RSP is
Yes.
a foregone conclusion.
Well, I don't know, have we actually done that analysis?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking,
I
like, did we
think we
get
got-
RFPs that we rejected
Yeah,
because
we
they
did.
didn't meet the
Okay.
criteria?
no, the baseline did,
Okay,
okay.
We thought,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Okay.
and that.
Kevin and I met with Alicia and Emily, and we thought they all met that baseline.
So we had 4 people, 4 sets of eyes look at the questions that were asked by the RFP. You know, how well any of them answered, that's why
Yeah.
the rubric is critical.
You might want to come up with not to make this more complicated, but the set of questions you have, 8 or so, 4, 6 or 8, and I line up each firm, you know, 15 minutes or half an hour, and just talk to each one and then make your decision.
So one.
And tell them right off, we have, you know,
Zero
X
time.
amount of minutes, we have
Right.
8 questions, we have X amount of minutes, and
Oh, it's
I
no
don't know.
different than a final interview, you know.
So
because I don't think you're going to be able to find the strands that you're talking about from
Right.
here.
Right,
yeah,
Because it's different in each one of the docs, you know.
yeah, and we could get a vibe, but we're required to treat all of them exactly the same, right? So like, the questions have to be standardized.
Right. You
Yeah.
know, just like an applicant.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say, well, I'm gonna ask this one.
Right.
So one question.
I see Doug's response.
One question I'm actually interested in is who would do the actual work?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
and from where?
Right.
yeah.
Because I have gotten lots of proposals from consulting firms where you're talking to Mr. Superman and you meet with Mr. Superman, and then when you hire the firm, you end up getting with the guy who just graduated from high school and is having a hard time figuring out how to use a keyboard.
Right.
You got the boy wonder, and that is no derogatory, and that reference goes back to Marvel characters. We wanted Batman, we got Robin. No, I'm sorry.
But that was my question about
Yeah.
like, what is our support, like who and how
Yeah.
that works, yeah.
We have the right answer.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Just need to be consistent about asking everybody.
right. Who's gonna lead this charge for us, and who's gonna be that primary rep?
I'm sure all of you hired people.
Hmm.
My experience with hiring people is it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Well, it is.
Because I have personal experience with doing background checks and talking to, their associates and all the rest. And then I don't know until they walk through the door whether it's gonna work.
Right.
I've never been able to actually, okay, I got the obvious felons out, but no matter how good a game they talk, I don't know until I've actually put them in the position for a while, whether they're actually gonna work. And that's
Fit. That's
Yeah.
that scary fit.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that's why I want
activities.
somebody who's got the magic touch to help guide past that.
The activities that we've done, because the current trend in hiring has been, to sift through, sort out people you think have the background and knowledge that you would hire them, and then you do the sifting exercise of like teaching a lesson, working through a problem of practice, doing a demonstration for a group, and in this role as superintendent, you think of the things that you expect the superintendent to do well, and you try to put them through an exercise that demonstrates what they can do. So a presentation is a great one.
Right.
Maybe you give them a problem with a parent, a complicated problem to work through. Like, what are your steps? What's your process? What's your thinking?
Go hire a general contractor to build a building.
So, I would imagine anybody who's going to be worth their weight, they're going to do that. The repertoire of the big things that you're going to have to deal with. Curriculum adoption and library materials and
I guess
social emotional problems with kids, and
we're gonna need to be able to, we can craft that with the rep that has that ability to move that for us, because that's part of our ask.
Yeah.
Okay. I know in the most recent one that we just finished a few weeks ago, we actually had this person take a specific piece of legislation that is hanging on the wall in Senate education and respond to Senate Education's question as to what would you do to correct this bill. And so there's no getting away from that. And in that job, that's part of what that person has to do every day of the legislative session. So just like Tom was saying, it's a very specific, ask. And we were able to, see the people do it real time, that presentation, just as if we were that committee, analyzing, their synopsis of that bill. So, I think that that's mission critical,
We asked them that Tom put together a Google document. If you can seed it with the rubric you've already developed for your searches, that can
it's always easier to edit.
Yep.
And have an existing framework to work
Okay.
off than to make it up. We will commit to reviewing it ourselves and adding to it. We will then have a conversation about, okay, what are the somewhere between 8 and 16 questions we want to have used as our rubric.
Okay, so, and that'll help, the firm that we do
Yeah.
decide to do as well.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
those will be the guiding principles for them to move the work forward.
Hmm.
So one other addition, Tom, if we would be if you could just send out, a request for dates, because we don't have another meeting, like we have to do it, not.
It'd be
next
22 or
week.
29.
Right.
So do we want to do a formal motion on this? Or is it just,
Let's. Yeah, I think that would help folks.
so, I'd like that we, I move that we direct the superintendent to, gather together questions, that we, come up with and to include in the document that she shares with us as part of that effort, questions from his rubric, hiring to give us some examples to work on with.
I'll second.
Is that good enough?
So
Yeah.
we have a motion and a second to request that the superintendent take the models that have, changed over time, and have been very successful, I think, to help us in selecting, our search.
Mhm.
All in favor, or unless there's any other? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thanks, Tom. Okay. And thanks for the conversation. 'Cause I remember the conversation we had 15 years ago. It was similar. But anyways,
Go get the group that did that.
yeah, right.
They did a good job.
But we took him out of retirement.
Yeah, I know.
You
That
know,
was part of it, is you had a,
Back
an
then.
elder that you could just go lean on and say, they do this right.
I know. He was special.
Dr. Prue was quite an
Yeah,
educator.
sort of Zen.
Yeah,
Zen
yeah.
like.
It was like going to Yoda.
Yeah,
Like
it
going
was.
to
It
Yoda.
was like,
You know? The education.
Yeah.
It's like, every time you spoke to him,
every time.
you left.
Spoke.
Like, whoa, this was really cool. But anyways, hopefully we'll find another Yoda. All right.
Yes.
The Raising a Concern website link.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you and especially Doug that I followed through on his request to create a link on the website for complaint. But what I did was use the how to raise an issue, voice concerns, and make change, which the board's very familiar with. Sarah might not be because she's newer, but it's a document I created years ago to let people know at any step in the process how to raise a concern, voice a concern, or make change. So if you're at the teacher level, you got to deal with the teacher doesn't give you satisfaction, you go to the principal doesn't give you satisfaction, superintendent, then board for the final sort of say on something. So that document outlines that, but then what I did was add this right sidebar on the website, sort of outlining the process there, giving that document that you see in your packet, this is how you raise a concern, raise an issue, voice concerns. So that's there for people, but then also, if you have a problem, this is where you report it. So you click on this and you automatically go to my email, should come right up. I don't know why that came up, but should go right to. I guess I gotta look at that. I don't know if it's something here, but it does go right to Alicia St. George's email.
Right.
And
Which was
then she knows where to route it.
Right.
If it's, and ask the questions based on the how to raise a concern document. So, yeah, I'll make sure that's working properly.
Now, is it her that will get the reminder if it hasn't been addressed in
Yes.
Right.
whatever the magic
Right,
yeah,
number
right.
is?
I think she's the right person. I've
Yeah.
spoken to her.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, that I think it was mutual,
Hmm.
But
I thought that looked good.
Yeah, it accomplishes the goal.
Hmm.
It accomplishes the goal.
Yeah,
we'll
and
have
last year we added,
have a chance to test.
I'm not sure if you can see it, but you should be able to. Everybody has every page has this one, which is a safety concern. That goes right to my email. Same process, report a safety concern. It's on every page. Works well.
Good.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Constantly evolving. Cool. So, school board student representative
Yeah.
update.
I'm glad Nelson's here. Nelson and I and the administrative team at the high school have tried a lot of different things to get students to want to, step up and give us their thoughts on different topics. We've held a couple of open sessions with students at the high school. We haven't had a huge return, but we've had a couple kids tell us what they're concerned about at the high school. I went to a student council meeting couple month ago. Talked to the entire student council about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to get their voice and bring their voice to the school board. Nothing has panned out from that. So our latest thinking is Nelson Fogg, the principal, and I going to all the individual history classes and having a conversation with the kids in that format to tell them what we want to do, why their voice is important, and what specifically the board would like to hear about. So maybe that's a place I can start right now, is what does the board think is important information from the students? What do you think? What do you want to know? What do you want to hear about?
I can cut to the chase. Just having written 2 references, one for Miss Merrill and one for Mr. Morris, who were 2 of our strongest, serving, members, on the board. One of them did for his project, his capstone project, was everything that we were asking about right this minute. If you read his capstone project, you go, duh, that's what we want. And it's that clear to me, he just did a rock star job.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. My suggestion to, Tom and Nelson is maybe, and I'd be willing to request, that the board, support this if there's any, question about, creating a new additional work position, in, a teacher's, piece is have a, like an ILC coordinator for the board position, so that person would, do the grading, read the paper, do that, for the credit that would be garnered from that work. And what, we've seen, is the students that they might not realize that that's something they're interested in until they have a chance to see that, oh, you mean, wait a minute, I could do that, that's interesting to me, this, and maybe that might help.
It's also in the strategic plan. I'm just throwing it out there. That engagement, civic engagement, both with the school and with the town. And like, that was one of Curtis's big lines and I think it's in the finals, the 5th section, but it talks about like, what is that civic engagement and like, how do we support it both from a school and the town level of like, what is the incentive to get a teenager engaged to find out that they're like, I really like this,
Yeah. The kids are so busy, and the students that are interested in being engaged are already engaged in so many things.
Well, and I mean, my teenager came home and told me that they couldn't do a thing at school because the board said no. And I was like, that's not actually how it works.
I'd love to know what that was.
I'll tell you offline, because I don't want to put my kid in a weird place.
Yeah,
but like,
no,
it
you
was
tell
just
me
like,
later.
I'm like, wait, that's not our job. Like, we don't make any decisions at school, like that's not where we are. So there's also, what perception of that.
But I know that students are engaged and they're interested. I mean, we just had that experience with the Supreme Court that was wonderful. And students were asking very appropriate questions and very informed questions. And they were impressive. So we're just we're having a hard time dragging it out of them.
Part of my thinking around having a designated person, I mean, we do mentoring of fellow teachers, we have DEI, folks in every building, and we're covering that, we're paying, subsidizing that extra time because we feel it's that important. So why wouldn't we, if you guys came up with
a civic engagement mentor,
right, the right person, we're all over it as a board, I would hope.
I mean, H. Corey has a student liaison slot, and I'm sure that there are other places where that could be a really good fit.
So that would be my recommendation, to you, if you'd consider that, and
I think one of the problems might be that, Mr. Fogg is closer than I am to the students, but it might be just that distance. It's too big a gap between the superintendent and the student to have that.
That's
not so much the comfort, because I think they're comfortable talking to me, but it's I don't really know how to navigate that.
Whereas
that space between
somebody in the building, that's dealing with them every day, like yourself, and your teachers, finding that, that right advisor,
can almost coach it, finesse it a little to say, boy, you have a lot to say. You should be talking to people who can make that change or consider the change you're looking for. Whereas,
and
Nelson, feel free to go to the mic and weigh in.
I don't know if I can be invited in or if I have to be invited in to speak.
No, you bet.
You just have to go to the mic and weigh in, I think, so people hear you, right?
So people can hear.
Sure.
Sorry, put you on the spot, but we've talked about
Well,
this a lot.
As important as this topic is for the board, along with other topics, it was fortunate that you were here, for this part of the discussion. So thank you.
I think that we obviously have to do something that we haven't done. Right, so whatever that happens to be, we have to explore that. we've had, you mentioned two individuals who were very, very strong liaisons to the board. And if the board's desire is to have those folks sort of just kind of naturally show up, I think what we've seen is that's unlikely.
Yeah.
Right, so, not because kids aren't interested in their civic responsibilities or being engaged in their community, but because the kind of kids that do that tend to be doing a lot of other things, including the two people that you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of balls in the air when those folks were engaged with the board. I could envision something similar to what you said. I could also envision it becoming a class at the school, where the board's reach, perhaps to the superintendent, would be to help shape some of the curricular pieces that would go into the class. The students' outcomes would be specific community engagement through the board, and potentially through other avenues. One of the realities of this, I think, is that when you find that something worked well, we look at that model and we go, well, that worked really well for this kid or for that kid. Let's replicate that. But the reality is that replication is dependent upon the right kid showing up and raising their hand and saying, I want to do that. And that's just probably not going to happen. So then it becomes the responsibility of the adults and ability to create something that's lasting and something that is year to year, it's there. And kids are plugged into it and know this is, if I'm doing this, this is what the outcome is going to be. If I'm taking this course, or if I'm working with this mentor, whoever that happens to be, whatever it happens to look like, I know I'm going to be participating at some level with the board. It still may not be that those people have the ability to show up every other Wednesday night, just because we've seen that play out.
But I think for the board, go ahead, Pete.
So, my daughter is now over 18, which means I have much less influence over her than I had at one point. But she has expressed at times interest in this subject. She is going to be back in the area over the Christmas New Year break. And while she probably wishes to spend most of her time doing what college students do, which is sleep, she may be willing to talk with you about some of her ideas on that if you are interested in that. Sure. And I can surely understand where you would say, no, we had enough of her. But she has expressed an interest in this. She actually had lined up some people to be her successors. It fell through for various reasons, but she actually had identified people who had expressed a willingness to step up and do this. So that might be a way to sort of kickstart it. I don't know if she's got a whole lot of time and energy, quite frankly, in what's going on in her life. But,
but even a Zoom meeting or something like that.
But if she's going to be back here anyway, and you're not doing the wise thing of getting away from Dodge for a little while, we might be able to do something. So I can broach that idea with her.
I certainly think having a conversation with her, having her experience, how do we systemically create that enduring model? Not relying upon somebody like your daughter showing up, as I said, raising her hand, but getting her input from the perspective of how do we create something that's appealing to the right student or students, that allows for people to have their voice and gives whatever is needed on the backside, whether it's a credit or whatever that looks like. I think she'd be a great person to sit and talk to, at least for my seat. Looking not at replicating what she did, but looking at how do we systemically create something that's enduring year to year.
Quite frankly, I think part of the reason
daughter was willing to do it, wanted to do it, was she'd seen the example of me doing this. Regularly. Thought it was something achievable and doable, because if her dad could pull it off, well, anybody could.
Well, I think it'd be worth, if you checked in with Roy, he was communicating with me to help Dylan's piece. And I've got my fingers crossed for him, but he's applying to do an internship in Senator Welch's office. And I think he's got a good shot, and it's because of the work, collective work that was done. And it's not, I agree with you, one size doesn't fit all, but having that information, was critical. Because the last time I ran into Dylan physically, he was working in Governor Scott's office last summer as an intern and doing a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now, for the governor. So, that's his interest, but that doesn't mean that, it has to be that same, student. It could come from any number of different areas of interest. It could be an interest in music.
Right, no, absolutely.
All right.
So
Some ideas.
thank you both.
Sure.
Thank you.
The subject of my daughter.
Yeah. Because it's so important, that student voice. So I really appreciate both of you.
Yeah, we're working hard at it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's been hit or miss, and mostly miss lately.
We want you
In
to
all
know
the
that-
years I've been here, we've had,
Mhm.
several really motivated,
Yeah.
students. And then we've had some that haven't worked out so well. And then we've had several years with no one.
Mm.
So it'd be nice to get something sustainable
Yeah.
and lasting.
And that is something that we support.
Mm.
I like the
That's
class
good.
idea part,
Yeah.
because it
Oh,
gives
yeah,
them
yeah.
some return on their time investment.
Yeah, I do too.
And having two history majors here, come
Mm.
on, guys.
I know. I know.
Political science just,
Mhm.
kind of fits in there a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyways. I digress. Okay, so that brings us to holiday messaging.
The a lot of folks are concerned in the schools because there's a lot of, not a lot of, but there is traditionally celebrating of holidays. And the administrators and I have been working on some sort of a policy like statement around, practicing what we preach around equity and diversity and inclusion. And we're going to continue to work on that with the administrators and try to come up with a statement. This is a sample. This is kind of where it currently is, but how they all feel about this and what they'd like to change or add or take away. But I think ultimately it's really the board's purview. I might be wrong, but I really think it's the board's purview as the elected representatives of the community. You represent the needs and wants of all of the constituents and all the folks who live in town and voted for you. And you should ultimately say, how you want to see this happen in your schools. I don't feel like I should say, thou shalt not celebrate all of these holidays, or you shall celebrate these, or you shouldn't celebrate it. I feel like it's really somehow needs to ultimately land with you and be what you want for your community. As much as I feel a part of the community, I feel, I work for you, and this is one of those sort of things that an elected representative should do. So this is what we currently have. I think it's Pretty clear. Hartford District is a diverse community that includes families of many different beliefs and customs connected to holidays, celebrations, and other cultural traditions that occur throughout the year. It is our intent to honor this diversity of beliefs and backgrounds in our community, as well as those around the globe. Therefore, we approach holidays from an educational perspective, using holidays to teach about topics such as history and culture, while not taking time away from education to celebrate holidays. And then I've added this piece. Therefore, there shall be no school-initiated or school-sanctioned formal or informal celebration of religion or religious holidays or religious festivals, which includes Halloween. And again, this is still in the development process, but one, I wanted you to be aware of it. Two, I really, ultimately would like you to carry this message to your community. Tell me if I'm mistaken or misled.
My only thought is to remove the word religious out of the final paragraph, because like what is Valentine's Day? You know what I mean? Like, what is 24 pieces of candy that my kid has to write someone's name on? Like, I'm not saying that I've enjoyed being at the White River School where Halloween was not a thing. Right. And like my high schooler takes care of it on his own and I don't have to be involved. But like being at an elementary school and knowing parents who have kids at different elementary schools and the stress involved in the costume and I can't wear my mask or my sword, so I can't be my guy, but this kid can wear his whole costume because his face is, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying like, so, but I guess my question is, because this is what parents are going to ask, is like, with the word religious in there 3 times, like what now counts? Is Halloween religious, but Valentine's Day isn't? Can we wear green on St. Patrick's Day? Like, that's where the minutia is going to come in. Because White River School is about to have a giant Thanksgiving festival, right? Like, is that a cultural celebration of America? Is that religious from pure, like, I'm just bringing up the like defining it, because focusing heavily on religion, religious holidays, and religious festivals makes it sound like we don't do Christmas. To me, as a parent, like that makes it sound like the outside, like, so I guess I'm curious, just kind of like, and even from like, people in the buildings, like, from an equity standpoint, is it fair to make kids feel left out? No. So what are the places where we're leaving people out, right? And that, I guess, would help me and help inform where this goes for me.
Well, and a lot of the message was around, or the impetus for the message was around staff and the school sort of promoting or supporting, not so much you can't wear a costume or you can't come in with a Christmas shirt or a Santa hat.
But we did get you can't wear a costume. White River School gets that direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Halloween
we do not celebrate Halloween at school, which is fine. I know it at the outset, but I guess that's the question. Is like, I asked, can I bring in cupcakes for my kid's birthday right now? I don't think so.
No.
Right. And so I guess when you're going to go this far about holiday guidance, our class is not going to celebrate these holidays. Right. And then you define what that means. Is it Valentine's Day? Is it, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I totally get what you're saying. And I have a problem with this, which may be odd. I am, perhaps because of inclination, perhaps because I went to law school, inclined to take the prohibition in the Bill of Rights about government interference with religion very seriously. And as is well known, my daughter and my wife are Jewish, and there's no way you're ever going to convince them that a winter holiday party is not, in fact, a celebration of Christmas.
Oh, of course.
But at the same time, these events in the lives of our students are an important part of who they are and what their culture is.
And how we get a balance between celebrating them as individuals, celebrating them as part of their community, and their ethnic background and all of that, because all of that makes a difference as to who they are, without being seen as being favorites to any of them, is a very hard question. And the extreme of we just won't do it bothers me. What I would like to see is we will figure out how to do it while we are reflecting and taking joy in what you bring to us, who you are, and not saying we're going to take something away from everybody else just because we haven't figured out how to do that. So I don't know how to. The famous example is square that circle. But I would much rather that we focus our efforts on trying to figure out how to celebrate our students rather than deny what is important about them as much as anything else, you know. And our culture is inevitably, inexplicably linked to our schools. You can't leave it at the door. It is part of who we are. But at the same time, we need to do this in such a way that we're not saying, well, if you're one of the majority religion in this area, you get to do something, and if you're not, you don't. Because that diversity is what's important about us as people. And the fact that we have, however badly, managed to somehow create some kind of balance of that tension in our civic and our political lives is what makes America different than any other country.
We also frame our entire framework around a Judeo-Christian, right? So like, do you offer high holiday? Could you trade a winter break day for a high holiday?
Oh, you asked my wife why things are always happening on the Jewish holidays where she cannot observe her religion and do whatever it is.
Right.
She's gonna she'll do a line on that.
But like we have winter break, that's in February. What is the break between December and January called?
It's winter break. I mean,
so what's the break in February called?
Winter break.
Right, that's what I'm asking. Because like
it was always Christmas.
It's holiday break, right? It's Christmas break and now it's holiday break. But like that's what it is.
February is really winter break. You're right.
So,
I mean, what's April break? Honestly,
spring break.
Easter.
But see, I grew up where it was
reverts around
tied to Easter.
Yeah.
Yes.
The break was started Good Friday and went, and here that's not the case.
I've had jobs in public schools where Good Friday was a half day.
Oh, in North Carolina, it's day off.
Yeah.
Day off.
Yeah, it's Friday all the way through the next week. Yeah. It's all spring break. So no, I'm not.
No, this is why.
Anti-celebration.
Exactly why I'm bringing it to you.
Yeah, I'm not anti-celebration in any fashion. I want to make sure that we're not overdoing it or underdoing it, right?
And there's a tension there.
Yeah.
We need to respect and understand. And the fact that I personally am not a very religious person in any way, shape, or form doesn't mean I don't see the value of it in the lives of people who are.
Yep.
And I think we need to reflect that. So I think this is a good attempt to be equitable, but I don't think it's the approach we should take. We need to figure out some other solution.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other?
There is a lot of concern even around Thanksgiving, because those that have really studied, Thanksgiving know that that wasn't necessarily the way things went down at all.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and
You know,
but the celebration, of community, the sharing of a feast, harvest is a positive thing. And I know at White River School
it's a great.
and in other schools, it's a great event, and people
Pound of
want
butter
to,
and a sheet cake I gotta take this year.
yeah,
I like it because they're involved. They're involved in making the
exactly.
meal.
And every grade level is involved, and every teacher and every student is involved, and that may be the only Thanksgiving some of those children have, and maybe it becomes more of a fall harvest.
Is it just at White River?
Festival
Do the
then.
other two elementary schools do it?
Other schools do things, nothing that
That
extensive.
squash tucking?
The RRC, the Regional Resource Center at the high school, does a big
Yeah.
turkey dinner.
Nice.
All right, good. Well, I'll bring this back to you in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Having worked in a department where we had 200 one day, 300 people the next day, and every religion one could imagine. And the staff was super sensitive about it. And you never heard them say Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah. It was Happy Holiday. And they went out of their way, if they were aware that there was somebody in the department that had a different religion with a different religious day, they went out of their way to make sure they celebrated it.
Mhm.
Not by saying it's Hanukkah, just by saying, have a nice holiday.
Yeah.
Happy holiday.
Mm. Yeah.
And believe me, trying to keep 300 nurses,
Yeah.
surgeons and anesthesiologists
Yeah.
happy at once.
And there's always, this is a very tough topic. It's not, it's more sensitive than politics in the schools, but I draw some correlations because every year, especially in the year that we have a presidential election, we have some teacher or staff person get into some trouble because they're too far one way or the other towards a candidate or an issue. And this issue is a little like that. I think the part of it that's problematic is when certain staff maybe celebrate is too strong, where it's not an acknowledgement or an awareness. It's more of a, this is what I do, and that's what's right. So, and I'm not saying there's any one particular person I'm thinking of, but just I think that's where it comes from. It's a little bit more like most of us celebrate Christmas, so therefore there's something less. So I think it's a good one for us to work out a amicable solution, appropriate solution to.
All right. So
I put this in here again.
Yeah.
Just to make sure everyone was clear on who was on what. I've had a few questions about different committees, so I wanted you all to. Be aware of it, and are there any gaps or is any committee underserved?
I know I saw it in the packet. Where is it?
Just before the minutes, when the monitoring reports.
Tech Center has their regional
Oh,
meeting
I
on
can-
Tuesday.
I can send this, show this too.
Okay, here it is. I got it. Just after the draft language we just discussed on holidays. A lot of people said no.
it is an audit.
Maybe I didn't put it in there.
appears to be correct. I've already effectively given my policy report. I believe we could say that the facilities group has already given its report. And the annual meeting, which took place recently, I was not able to attend this year for the first time in a very long time.
Really. It went well. Nancy was there both days. I was there Friday. And Friday's speaker was really powerful as far as, working superintendent from the middle section of California school district, probably similar to ours size-wise. And just, helped. I'll have to see if I can get the link to a typical school board meeting. He showed this thing, and it was hilarious, but kind of real at the same time. And it was a SNL takeoff on a school board meeting. It's well worth the 5 minutes to watch.
He was great, very entertaining, I thought.
We need that reflection, on our work sometimes. But I'll try to see if I can find that skit for you, and I'll share it with the board because that was great. The kids did a presentation from school.
Yeah, like what was the practice they were using in their classes to analyze readings and lessons? It was good.
But so it valuable as always. Anytime you get a chance, to go to, one, it's well worth the time spent. And then you meet colleagues from around the state doing the same work. That's always good, as well. So that's kind of the update, on that one. The manifest pieces are moving, well. I think this is the first run out of the new software, the one that came out at 4:30 this afternoon. So I haven't had a chance to review it yet. Forward to that. And as far as the equity, piece, we've seen the reports, coming through, and that work is great. Still formulating the first district-wide, meeting of all of the champions, the building champions. So that's coming. So I think we're waiting to hear from Jacob on the audit.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's it for our area.
Anything on Corey that you wish to?
Pat Attillo is our chair. Molly Amber still serving as our vice chair. And we've decided to adopt a rotating clerk model, just around the room, submitting minutes. Chief Sheldon joined us on Wednesday. Fabulous discussion just about his vision and kind of how he approaches things. We talked about the strategic plan. We talked about Project Vision. We talked about the select board's community wellness assessment. They've chosen a vendor. Strategy Matters, I think. I hope I don't get that wrong. Yeah, and it was in the second group of interviews of the 3. And we've reached out to our new town manager, which obviously he's been in his job for like a hot second, so we haven't kind of pushed on him. Yeah, I think that's where we are right now.
as the
On
vacation.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
Now that I'm no longer on that board, I can report something that has always caused a problem for me with being on the board. I have a very good friend whose son took part in the activities there, and that family always referred it to as the hack the cactus. And so I've always had a time not coming out with that phrase. Because I was
It's a
exposed
new one
to
on
it
me.
by the family.
Speaking of acronyms. So I think we've covered.
Yeah, good.
covered that. So that brings us to the meeting. We gotta do public.
Public comment, let me see if there's anyone there. No. Nobody in Zoom land.
So that brings us to the consent agenda.
I apologize about the delay in my getting out the reports on the monitoring reports on GP3 and ESR 5. But they were sent out and they're included in the package.
Usually, Sarah, things in the consent agenda we don't discuss, but I guess if there was a question, you could
Right,
pull
right,
it out,
right.
discuss it.
No, I mean, I followed along once I got the second file.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's
It
fine.
automatically saved it, and then
Yeah.
I'm looking at it going, oh, it's sent out in a format nobody's gonna be able to read.
I spend about 10 minutes trying to get it open because I'm so determined. I'm like, I'll figure it out.
Fix it.
I'll tell Peter I can't get it open.
So anyway, yeah.
Mine's a little harder to read, sorry.
So I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda. So I was at one of the meetings and not at the other. I will approve of one of those and abstain from the other one, which I wasn't present at. If we do decide to approve it.
So there's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. And, with the caveat. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one abstention for the minutes of 10:25.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that brings us to, we know our next meeting is 12/13. And we need to do our evaluation and then request an executive session.
Anybody else wish to do the run through, or would you like me to do it?
You can be good at it.
So as we do it after every meeting, we decide whether or not it was satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory on the following things. The board was prepared for the meeting, satisfactory. The board's time was spent on ends, not means, satisfactory. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate, satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness, satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order as appropriate or necessary. Board adhered to its adopted governance style in that it emphasized outward vision, it encouraged diversity in viewpoints, it exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained the distinction between boards and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. Satisfactory. And then we need an executive session.
I texted you the.
You did.
Yes, I did. It's the same as.
Okay, let me pull it up. Wait a second. I will.
But it's 313A2, real estate matter.
That's the one we use.
Right. Okay. I would move that the board find that it is appropriate to enter into an executive session for the purpose of discussing a real estate matter pursuant to 1 BSA 313A2, and that the board does go into said executive session.
And I'd like to just amend to invite the superintendent and principal of the high school into that executive session.
So remember,
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to go into executive session with the invited participants. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mike.